I'm Dean from the Workshop Whisperer, and welcome to the A Grade Auto Repair Shop Show, where you'll learn what successful seven-figure auto repair shop owners do differently for more profit and more freedom. In today's episode, I'm going to be walking you through the why loop, how to discover how your team thinks. See, most auto repair shop owners who feel like they're doing all the thinking for their team have tried all the obvious fixes. They've worked with better staff, they've tried to instill clearer instructions, they've probably done more training, or they've spent a lot of time watching the work that their team do more closely. They've probably been coming in earlier, and they've probably been leaving their repair shop later. And ultimately, the exhaustion just never goes away. See, one of our engine room members runs a 4-bay shop with a solid team and capable technicians. But he was still spending his afternoon redoing work or dealing with customer complaints about jobs that had already been done. He'd fix it, he'd have a word with the team member, and he'd make the standard clear for them once again. But 3 days later, he'd see the same results. And 3 weeks later, he'd just feel more frustrated. Turns out he'd replaced his technician team twice, but the problem came back each time, just with new faces. After 11 years of running that shop, he'd never once had a conversation to find out how his team was thinking about the work before they even started. So every correction he'd made in those 11 years was aimed at the outcome, the final result. The problem was the way that his team think was still sitting there going untouched. And ultimately, the team was just going to be ready to produce the same result over and over again. So if you're doing all the thinking for your team, you're double checking work, you're running to put out every fire, and you're being called when anything in your repair shop goes sideways, then the conversation that changes it is actually simpler than you think. Now, before we get into this training, we've got a free resource called Just Say No. It's for shop owners who keep saying yes to every question, every problem, and every decision that should sit with their team. Don't grab it yet, just know that it's there. We're going to come back to it. Now, let me show you what's actually happening when things go wrong. In every single workshop, there is a flow that occurs. Firstly, there's a job that comes in. Then there is work that gets done. And at the end, there is a result that you see. But here's the thing. You have a clear idea on what the job looks like. Or at least you have a clear understanding of, you think, what the steps or tasks actually look like in that job. And you're really, really clear on what the job looks like, so that at the end, you feel like a target's been hit. But the problem happens here in the middle. Because when your team member goes to work, there's something that happens inside their head. There might be a difference in how they're reading the job. There might be a difference in what they think the standard is, and what they think done looks like for that completed job might be very different to what you think done looks like. So in their head, there's a question mark. There's a change, there's a difference. There might be a misinterpretation of what you're expecting the end result to be. And it's this question mark what they're thinking that determines the result you get at the end of the job. Now, when the result is wrong, when what happens here is not what you're expecting, then most owners do this. They come back here. And they think the answer is to come back and correct the job. They'll fix the work. They'll have the conversation about the standard. They'll make the expectations clear again and again and again and again. But the problem here is that the thinking that produced the result, and what do I mean by that? What the tech or the service advisor or the workshop manager or the reception team were thinking is what actually produced the result. And when left untouched, when left unspoken, that thinking just continues through all other jobs and all other tasks. It's always there. Now, a team member can follow the steps correctly. They can tick off all the boxes. They can produce an acceptable result, but they can still have no real understanding of the aim of the work, the result you actually want. And for routine tasks, that's totally fine. But when the job becomes more and more complex, which plenty of repair work is, then execution without understanding breaks down really, really fast. And so the owner gets called. And in most cases, that's going to be you. Now, one of our new engine room members put it to me really, really plainly. They said, I don't know what they're thinking until something goes wrong. And by the time the thinking that produced the result, or you become aware of the thinking that produces the result, well, something's already gone wrong. It's already cost you time, it's already cost you money, or in worst case, it's already cost you a customer. So what do we call this space in here? This is what we call the thinking gap. And the thinking gap is the distance between what you expect and what your team member understands. But here's the thing. The why loop, which is what I'm about to share with you now, closes this gap, the thinking gap, shrinks it before your team starts work on the job, not after it's gone horribly wrong. So let's look at the why loop. Now, the why loop is simply, it's 2 cycles of 3 questions, and I'm going to draw them both out for you. If we think of box 1, this being box 1 up here, right? Box 1 is the first loop of 3 questions that you run through with your team before the work starts. You'll notice that the 3 questions form the word why. Now, Why would we create a conversational loop that has the acronym of why? Well, up here, most auto repair shop owners, when things go wrong, mutter under their breath or out loud, why the F did they do it like that? But the why loop gets you very clear on what they're going to do to deliver that. At the end of the day, you don't want to feel like that you're running a daycare center for grown-ups. You don't want to feel like you're a parent always having to speak to a child about why they're doing something, or forever be asked the question, why? If you're listening to this and you've got young kids and they're under the age of 4, you'll know that's probably the one question they ask you more than anything else across a day. Why, mum? Why, dad? And we don't want that type of parent-child dynamic to be at play inside your auto repair shop. And the key here is that this first why loop, box 1, helps to sort this problem out for you. Box 1 happens before the work begins, right? So it's before they even go to work. It's going to fit somewhere in here. Box 1. The first question, before anyone picks up a tool, grabs a scanner, pops the hood, does whatever the first task is in that job, the first question is always, what's the aim of the job? You want to get a feel from your team, what's the outcome? What does the end result look like? What does done mean? What does good look like from your standards and your expectations? The key is to ask this question, what's the aim, what's the outcome, before the work has even started. Stephen Covey, in his book, The Seven Habits of Highly Effective People, says habit number 1 is start with the end in mind. Help your team get really clear on what the end result looks like when it is completed to the standard or the expectation that you have. So our first question is, what's the aim? What's the outcome? What does done actually look like? And ask your techs, ask your team, ask your service advisor that same question every time before they start work. Now, what they say to you will tell you whether they understand the standard expected or the end result that you're anticipating. And most importantly, whatever they answer is going to say a lot about whether they're about to produce something or do something that's going to mean they miss the target. Now, what you'll also notice through their tone of voice is that they might have complete confidence that they're about to go and do the right thing. But we always start with the first question being, what's the aim? Get your team to clearly tell you what done looks like. The second question is this, not in bright green. Second question is, how do you intend to get there? And by there, we mean to the result. Now, notice we ask, how do you intend to get there? Or, how are you going to plan this out? What we're not asking the team member here is, what are the steps? We're asking the team member, what's their plan to achieve the result, the outcome? And that's really important, because the plan that they describe to you is going to highlight where the gaps are for them in their understanding or their interpretation or their technical expertise for the job that they're about to undertake. And that's really important, because you're not going to go and fix that just yet. You're going to go and ask, okay, well, what's your next steps? At the very least, you want one very clear action from that team member. One clear task, one clear step that they can completely nail down. You're not correcting anything yet. You're simply listening for what they respond or how they respond. And more importantly, you're finding out how this person thinks about the job before you even let them go near it. Now, we just simply set that box, that loop in motion, and we sit with it. Because we then follow to the second loop, box 2. And the key about box 2 here is that this really is the pressure test. What do I mean by the pressure test? Well, if box 1 is about finding out how your team member, your tech, is planning on doing this work, then box 2 is putting some pressure on that plan to see where it breaks, or to help your team member to discover where their plan is broken. So loop 2 of the why loop starts with this. Whatever they say here, especially in the how do you intend to get there, the first question of loop 2 goes like this. Will that get you closer to the result? Will the plan they've just laid out for you, and will their first next steps get them closer to the result? Again, if what they say to you, you already know through experience is going to get them further away from the result, then you can raise it then. But not by telling them, by asking, by inquiring about the plan. Because when they say, when you ask them, will that get you closer to the goal? What you're really asking them for is confirmation of if the approach they've just described will actually produce the outcome that they said they were aiming for. Because sometimes the result we want, or the result your team member is telling you that they're going to deliver, well, that can be right. But the plan, the way they intend to do the work, might actually be wrong. This also allows you to identify what level of risk you're willing to tolerate from that team member or on that job. Of course, if what they're intending to do is going to create a life or limb threatening situation for them, it's going to cost an extraordinary amount of time for you. It might cost, let's just say an incredibly uncomfortable amount of money, or it produces the very real risk that the customer will get back in you will hand them back an unsafe vehicle, or the job will be of poor quality. Then you've got the opportunity to correct before any problems really start. But the key thing here is when we ask this question, will that get you closer to the result? Well, that question alone makes gaps in their plan really visible to the team member, not just to you. If what they say they're going to do is logical, acceptable, and it follows the SOP, the documented process, or the manual for how that job routinely gets done, then great. Give them all the confirmation they need, all the reinforcement that they're doing the right things. Go back to doing what you're doing so you can get out of the way and let them do what they've got to do. But if you can see there is a gap in their plan, your next question is this: how else could you do it? This question is really, really important, mainly because it introduces choice. The key word here being could. How else could you do it? So by introducing choice into the conversation, you've just activated new parts of your team member's brain and switched on a new light for their thinking. Because how else could you do it implies that there is a better way. Maybe there's a faster way, a more efficient way, a less costly way. And ultimately, that there may be a way that gets them closer to the right result without all the wasted time, money, or effort. So how else could you do it? And then we wrap up again. And of course, if the technician, and you stick with this questioning, like if you know there's a better way and you've already run the calculations in your head that tells you the intended plan that your technician had was going to create an unacceptable level of risk in time, money, or customer satisfaction, and you've asked them, well, how else could you do it? But you're not getting anything. Sit with that question. Don't rush to fix, don't rush to rescue, don't rush to save. You simply have to believe that your technician does have another answer. It might not be the perfect answer. It might not be the exact right next step, but do not ask another question until your technician has answered the question of how else could you do it. And when they've come up with alternatives, options, then your final question is to battle test, okay, well, what's your next step or steps now? We've got a locked in action, a revised plan, but a clear agreement and expectation for this. For how the work's going to be done. We're no longer questioning here. We're now agreeing on how the work is going to proceed. The key point here, though, is that as the owner, you're doing the asking, right? You're asking here. You may do some loops in there. If it's a long, complex job, there may be some loops where work's done. You come back to loop one, work gets done, you come back. But the team member is doing the thinking. You're discovering how they think through the why loop. Easy to work out. You're discovering how they think. You're uncovering problems before they occur. And you're battle testing the work plan before the work begins. No answer is handed to your technician. There's no thinking that gets done for them. It's simple that the writing on the framework is blunt. Your team members stop doing the work without understanding why. Because you start asking them why without asking them why. It's a framework. The beauty here for you as an owner is that you stop acting after the result. What we want to avoid is the owner correction. We want to remove or reduce the owner correction. Stopping reacting to outcomes after the fact and start understanding the thinking that goes into the work before the work begins. And what we see is that a shop that's running at 6 figures often has an owner who catches problems by checking the work. They're consistently looking at the result, going through all the corrective work, and then coming back to fix the job. But a shop at 7 figures is operating here. They've got an owner who catches problems by asking the right questions first. That resource, Just Say No, that you can get in the description box below, Just Say No is the mindset shift. But the why loop, this cycle of 6 questions, well, this is the tool that makes work practical. When your team comes to you with a question, you now have a structure for what to do instead of simply handing over the answer and becoming the bottleneck to all of the work. You can download the Just Say No free resource. As I said, the link is in the description below. Now, let me show you what changes as the why loop becomes the default conversation in your shop. Let me draw this for you first. It's a pretty good staircase. Now, if we think here, let's put this as, this here is your below below 500K. You're doing somewhere up to about 40,000 a month. It's probably you. Maybe you've got one other tech on your team. You might have someone in admin, right? But under $500,000, the owner is doing all the thinking. They're doing all not just doing all the thinking, but they're doing all the work or rework, plus they've got to monitor all the results. Everything rests on the owner. Every complex job, every complex situation, every problem that sits outside routine work comes back to them. While it's a small team, the team executes tasks that they've done before. But when something new comes up, or the standard expected isn't clear, then the thinking gap between the owner and the team, right, that gets really, really big. Really, really big. So as the owner, they'll end up pretty tired, pretty overwhelmed, overworked, and definitely exhausted. They're probably double checking everything, running around, putting out almost all the fires. And ultimately, for a business at that size, they are so stuck in the business, they can't step back, because when they do, the quality of work drops, and the number of problems inside the workshop multiplies. And it's not that the team isn't bad. It's just that the conversation that would close the thinking gap has never happened. They've never taken the small amount of time it takes to run through those two why loops before they let their team loose on the jobs they've asked them to do. Now, let's look at the next step here. So this is to 1 million of annual turnover. So turning over somewhere around $80,000 to $90,000 in total turnover a month. Now, for an owner here, they've usually got a team of 3 or more at this level. Now, at this level, the owner has started asking questions. The why loop will definitely get used, and certainly for the members inside engine room and our boardroom, $1 million boardroom mechanic members, they've definitely stepped into the role as coach to their team. So the why loop that we've talked about is getting used before complex jobs, on jobs where something might have gone wrong the last time the team did it. And they're definitely having the why loop conversations with newer team members. Now, some on the team might get it, but others on the team might still be a little unsure. And for those team members that do get it, they're starting to ask themselves the same set of 6 questions. They're starting to cycle through the why loop for themselves before they go to work. And of course, others aren't there yet. So the key for the owner is, well, the good news is they're less exhausted, but they're still more involved than they want to be, right? So if we look here, there's a space here where, well, now at least at this point, we've got the team that's doing some thinking. The team are definitely doing more of the work. And when I say more of the work, I mean they're doing more of the work, the repair work, the custom work, the rebuild work, the servicing work. And they're starting to take some ownership for the results. Right? So here we can see the owner is starting to get some distance between the team. There's some autonomy. some freedom, some responsibility that's laid back on the team. But here's the thing. Once we're up at this point and we're $1 million plus, well, this is really how it starts to change. Is that here, there's a sizable team. For a repair shop that has 2 qualified techs, 2 apprentices, we would expect a shop of that size to be able to produce 1.1 to 1.2 million of total turnover per year. The good news here that for $1 million and beyond, we are always advocating for the why loop to be the default conversation between the owner and their team. And most definitely, if one of the team here is actually the go-between between the owner. So this might be the owner. This might be workshop manager or service advisor. And here, of course, we've got techs. And we would expect and encourage why loop to happen here and happen here. And the why loop happens before any significant job gets undertaken. It's not just for new people, but it's for anyone on any complex job or high value job. The team themselves are already internalizing the why loop conversations. They're asking themselves those 2 sets of 3 questions inside their own head. And the beauty is when something unexpected comes up at mid-job, well, they actually get to work on working through it themselves before they go and call the owner. And it's this point that the owner's role really shifts, because what they start doing now is they're setting standards. They're driving, or they're outlining behaviors. And the way to talk about that is that they're really maintaining the values and they're working on reviewing the results. Not doing the work, reviewing the results. And all of this is occurring through conversations with their key personnel. Here we call them feedback forums. And it's the quality of the conversations that what separates the 3 stages of 0 to 500K, 500K to $1 million, and $1 million plus of total revenue per annum across repair shops. So here's the anchor for this episode. Right. You can't fix how your team thinks by simply giving them the answers. Every time you give a new team member the answer, then you fixed the problem in front of you, but you've left the thinking that's created the problem untouched. Right? And next job, next week or next month, when your technical team or any team member goes back to do that same job, the same thinking that produced the result you didn't want last time is still there. So you've got 3 questions and I want you to apply them this week. First, I want you to think about the last time a job went wrong in your auto repair shop. Did you know how your team member was thinking before that problem occurred? The answer is probably not, right? You probably found out about it somewhere down here at result level. Now, the why loop moves the opportunity to discover the problem earlier in the workflow, right? Earlier in the workflow. And when you make the why loop your default conversation before work begins, you actually catch the problem before it occurs. And that single shift alone changes everything about how you spend your time. Now, second, when a team member comes to you with a problem this week, run loop 1 before you say anything. Right? Ask what they're trying to achieve. What's the aim? What's the outcome? What's the result? And ask them, how do they intend to get there? So get clear on what it is they're trying to achieve and how they're planning to get there. And make sure you listen to the answer. Do not rush in to correct it yet, which is going to feel very uncomfortable to do. I simply want you to listen, because what your team members tell you will tell you more about the real problem than any of the results or outcomes of the job ever will. And third, after you've asked loop 1, go and ask loop 2. Will the plan they've told you they're going to follow actually get them to the right result? If you know it's not going in the right direction, then ask them how else could they approach it? And use the conversation as a way to let them find a better way to do the work for themselves. And here's the beauty: the why loop does not need a dedicated meeting or a scheduled session. It works on the workshop floor, at the front counter, and before any job that matters inside your auto repair business. Together, it's just 2 loops and 6 questions. And that single shift changes how you spend every day inside your auto repair business. And the why loop is just one of the foundations of the coaching conversations that we help auto repair shop owners build inside the engine room every single day. Because it's the questions you ask before the work starts that are the ones that change how your team thinks about the work, and over time changes the results you see from the work that your team do. Now, here's the important thing to remember. Correcting outcomes all the time keeps you incredibly busy. And at times it can make you feel incredibly useful inside your auto repair business. But when you correct the thinking of your team around how the work gets done, that's what actually sets you free inside your auto repair business. So a team that needs the owner to catch their mistakes will always need the owner, you, to be there. But a team that learns to run the why loop on themselves stops making the same mistakes over and over and over again. So the work doesn't change when you always rush in to fix the outcome. It changes when you fix the thinking that creates the outcome. Now, if this episode has you thinking differently in any way about your auto repair business, and you'd love to find out how we help auto repair shop owners build a team that solves its own problems, then just click the links in the descriptions below. There's no pressure, there's no sales calls, there's just clear information so you can decide if now is the right time and that the Workshop Whisperer might be the right fit to help you get some help with your auto repair shop. And I look forward to seeing you on the next episode of the A Grade Auto Repair Shop Show.